Hamadakyapi, Nick Tilsen, Amakyapi, Chantea Washtena Petchuzapolo. This is Nick Tilsen, and this is season 3 of LANDBACK for the People. I can't believe it's already the 3rd season. Over the first 2 seasons, we have seen amazing and heard from amazing frontliners, leaders, elders, change makers, organizers, storytellers, innovators, all working in the LANDBACK movement in a bunch of different ways, and all working to build the collective power of Indigenous people, communities, and nations. And at the beginning of season 3, we are going to jump into conversations about leadership, because any movement that ever has existed in the world, it takes leadership. It takes committed leadership. It takes diverse leadership with a wide variety of different expertise and experiences. And NDN Collective, being an organization who supports a growing movement, it's important that we have a diversity of leadership coming from different backgrounds and expertise. Since its inception, NDN Collective, through our grant-making arm, has supported over 1,457 grantees, individuals, tribes, organizations, collectives, frontliners, language schools, food sovereignty initiatives, businesses, what have you. And in the amount of over $109 million since we started doing grant making just 5 years ago. In our lending arm of NDN Collective, we've done about $10 million in lending to 14 different businesses, funding climate solutions, things that help build up community wealth in Indian country. And we have waged successful campaigns. Just last month, it was announced that the mineral withdrawal right here in Rapid City, right here in the Chesapa, right here where this podcast and this show is headquartered at, and where NDN Collective is headquartered at, the organizing work resulted in a 20-year mineral withdrawal, banning mining in the proximity of Pactola Reservoir and the Rapid Creek watershed, protecting those sacred waters from pollution, and that took organizing, good old-fashioned organizing, people submitting public comments, advocacy in Washington, D.C., and of course, incredible leadership by Secretary Deb Haaland to have the vision and foresight to help move this forward. NDN is supporting Indian country and Indigenous communities at unprecedented levels, both as frontline organizers and practitioners. And over the past 7 years of building and leading this organization, the weight of that has gotten heavy. Today, NDN Collective is 108 staff. It operates in 3 different countries, supports over 1,400 grantees, and is helping build movements for radical change for Indian country and for Indigenous communities, including our work in the LANDBACK movement, which we get to talk about on this show. Today, it is my tremendous honor to talk about leadership. And here at NDN Collective, we are in the middle of a leadership evolution where we actually have a triad. We have a triad of senior leadership here at NDN Collective. In the past, my title was President and CEO, and we broke that out to 2 different titles, President, CEO, and we have a Vice President as well. Our Vice President has been a longtime matriarchal leader of this organization, Gaby Strong, who is the Vice President of the organization, who helped build the foundation and the grant making and resource rematriation work right here at NDN Collective. And today, on this show, I get to announce the new president of NDN Collective. And I'm honored to announce that our new president at NDN Collective is going to be Wizipan Little Elk. He's a member, a citizen of the Sicangu Lakota Oyate, a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe, a known bona fide leader who grew up on his res in his community. He has served 2 different administrations. He served in an Obama administration. He served in the Biden administration, particularly as the principal deputy assistant secretary of the Department of Interior, underneath Secretary Dub Haaland, and has now made the decision to come join our team here at NDN Collective. Gaby will continue, Gaby, or Auntie Gaby, will continue to be the vice president of NDN, and she will continue to be the matriarchal anchor of this organization. And I will step into the role of CEO, and we'll continue to collaborate with one another and build with one another. And for me personally, this also marks an opportunity for me, because I understood and understand that I can't sustain this leadership in this way unless I have others help carry the burden of that and the water of that. And I couldn't be more fired up than having 2 remarkable leaders in Gaby Strong and Wizipan Little Elk to be doing this work with. So here we go. Let's get into it. Land Back for the People, Season 3. All right, so here we are, Season 3, Land Back for the People, and I got some awesome guests and some awesome leaders here at NDN Collective. We have the Vice President of NDN Collective, Gaby Strong, Gaby Strong, one of the matriarchs of NDN Collective, an OG here at NDN. And then we have the new president of NDN Collective, Wizipan Little Elk, and comes from the Sicangu Nation. So we upped our Sicangu Lakota Oyate quota, which is a long-standing thing between the Oglalas and the Sicangu. But it's exciting. You know, we just completed our 7th year of NDN Collective, and we're entering into our 8th year as an organization. We're at scale. Like I told some of the audience earlier, in order to sustain an impact organization that we're doing here to support all the work happening in Indian country, it takes a diversity of leadership with different experiences and lived experiences and points of view and professions. And I'm fired up that we have built a triad of Indigenous leadership here coming from a diversity of different areas. So I'm going to start with Gaby, because we always have to start with the matriarchs. It's the rule. And just to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience, and also a little bit about yourself and why you came to work at NDN and how long you've been here.
Yeah, well, it's good to be here with all of you relatives. Gaby Strong is my English name. I'm Bedewankantu, Susitawa, Wakbetua, Dakota. My Dakota name is Tania Wakawi. And I have been here since 2020, right before the pandemic, right before our worlds changed dramatically at that time. And I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to have come at that time. And I came because I had been watching what NDN had been doing. At that time, it was maybe a couple years old, or just getting started. And I really felt that vision and that mission speaking to me. And so even though I was pretty established in what I was doing at the time in philanthropy, working with one of the largest global philanthropies.
Cargill, right?
Yes, Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropy is at that time. But what was being envisioned here was pulling me. And so you and I had that conversation, and I threw my hat in the ring there, and here I am, and was able to take on that grant making role. And I'm grateful every day for having done that, because we've been able to do things with our people, for our people, in a way that hasn't been seen before. And so always in deep gratitude for that.
Absolutely. Well, we couldn't have been more blessed to both have you as a leader, a professional, an auntie, and a relative to do this work. And, for those of you that have been resourced by NDN Collective, Tumi Gaby and her team, she built that. She built the system to be able to do that. And, I had a big vision, a big idea, knew the need, but Gaby was the leader who actually built those systems and has been able to deploy those resources to you. So everybody always like, hey, I need a grant, and they text me. I'm like, you better talk to the aunties around here. They got the control of that mom and ska. So good to have you. So Wizi, stepping into this role as president, can you share a little bit about your journey, about your life, your journey, introduce yourself, and why you decided to come, be a part of the team here at NDN Collective?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Hamidake iha chante washtena pe chuzapelo Wizipre macha pelona sichangula kota hamacha. And I think it's really important that we always live into who we are and our identity, and this kind of embodies why I'm here, right? And so I'm from Sichangu, and everyone calls us Rosebud. That's a colonized name. That's not who we are. That's not who we call ourselves as one of the 7 council fires. And so always talk about that, like being Sichangu and what that means. And the story behind that is about, really walking through the fire and walking towards something and doing what's hard and what needs to get done. And that's our origin story is Sichangu. And then I'm also Ashke Gluipi Tioshpai, our Tioshpai, my Tioshpai, where I come from, we were known as resistors. We kept our traditions alive. We signed the treaty, but we were also very strong in our traditions and in keeping that treaty upheld, and that's flown through and been a part of my identity since I was a young kid. And kind of the charge that folks like my grandma told me, go out and learn in the outside world, come back and help. Learn, come back and help. And so that's something I've always tried to do. And Nick, you started this conversation with a really, with to me is like the key word on why I'm here, and that's impact. Mm-hmm. As I was ending my federal service, I wanted to go where I could be a part of an awesome team of people that think Indigenous, people that are doing the work, being practitioners and having impact. And when I look at what NDN has done over these years, and it's huge. It's had a massive impact. Well, my old organization, before I went to federal service, I worked for my tribe, and we were an NDN grantee. And I've known Nick, since before he started NDN, and just nothing but respect for what's been going on, what's happening. A team with balance and a good diversity of thoughts and approaches. That's just exciting, and quite frankly, like this is a dream to be able to be someplace where you can authentically be yourself and lean into who you are as an Indigenous person. And I could go on and on, but those are some of the reasons why I came.
Yeah.
Well, we're honored to have you, and this is an exciting time, to share, to share in part in a journey. And I was telling the staff the other day too, like, it's a great honor to do this work with people who understand that we're stewards of a spiritual process too. There's more than meets the eye with this work that we do here at NDN Collective. Somebody a long time ago, they prayed for these things. They prayed for us to be still here, singing our songs and practicing our ceremonies, standing up for our land, creating opportunities for our people, and we get to answer that call. And that's why I always say, we're just on a continuum. We're on a continuum of 500 years of Indigenous resistance and of 500 years of Indigenous innovation too. At the same time, the thing I like and love about NDN is that this whole collective is made up of different practitioners, of having had done this work in their communities before they even came here to be a part of this. And this is important for the audience to know, to our grantees to know, and for our funders to know, and for our partners, and for the public to know, that is a prerequisite. It is part of what is required, because it's that what makes and keeps our organization honest, is that we also came from doing this work as frontliners, as community people, and we continue to do that work in this organization as frontliners and community people today. So I have a question. It's a question that's kind of to both of you. I'll start with Wizi, then we'll come back to Tui. Can you talk a little bit about your work that you did, in your own community prior to even going to the federal government, and then prior to coming to NDN?
Yeah. I after I graduated from St. Francis Indian School, in Rosebud, and then went out east and worked. Went to school and then worked, and then was called home in 2011, and spent just over a decade at home, and the vast majority of that time, I worked for and was the CEO for our tribe's Economic Development Corporation. So we owned businesses, we ran subsidiary businesses. We also had a lot of community development work, and that's where Nick and I first got to meet each other. But a lot of it was trying to fulfill the needs of the community. Creating jobs, creating businesses that brought in income to feed the work, to help support the tribe. We did a lot of community based work, and we had very specific initiatives around that. We had a food sovereignty initiative. We started, and we had a lot of work streams under that. But one of the things I was so proud of, with the team, and it wasn't just, I didn't do it. It was always the team, and my role was always to help facilitate team members to shine and to do what they do best. But we had one of the biggest farmers markets in South Dakota, and it's still going and gets bigger. So when I'm at home and I get to go there, that's awesome. We had a farm. The tribe entrusted us with farmland, and when I and we had been doing conventional farming, we transitioned that to organic farming, and that was really big for us. We started a language immersion school. Something that's still going, a place where two of my kids are at right now.
What's that school called again?
It's called Wakanja Tokerchi, which means children first. And we named it that because so much of what we do around youth is always adult-centered and focused. And we wanted, the idea was, what happens when you put children first, when you make decisions in the best interest of children? And it's amazing to think and to see what an organization like that's doing, the way people are thinking. And, we got kids talking LANDBACK and treaties in that school. And so it's really, it's about changing the hearts and minds and developing the future leaders. We started a social impact business, and I call it a business. It wasn't really a business, but in 3 years we started the Woolakota buffalo herd. One of the largest Native American owned and managed buffalo herds in the world, and that's 28,000 acres, and it shows that you can go from nothing to something that's one of the biggest projects in the world just in 3 years, and it's financially self-sustaining. but it provides so much more because it's healing the land, it's reconnecting people with buffalo, and not just in an idealistic way, but going out and doing harvests and learning how to butcher, to process the meat, to pray with the animals, to be true, authentic relatives. And so that was some of the work that I was involved in when I was back home. And then I got the call and asked to join the Biden administration. And I had couple questions when I was talking, and I said, do I get to work on land? I said, yeah, you get to help lead it. Do I get to work on buffalo? Yeah, you get to help lead it. Do I get to work on language revitalization? They're like, yeah, you get to help lead it. And I was like, okay, we can do this, but it was always with the intention of going for 3 to 4 years and then coming home, because while I went out to work in DC, my kids and my family stayed at home. And so I basically commuted between Washington, D.C. and Rosebud. And because my kids were in a language immersion school and they needed to be there. Also, you got to, it's not just about the individual, it's about the family staying connected to community. And, my kids, it was really important that my kids stay connected to their grandma, my mom. She didn't have that many years left, and we needed them to have that bond and get those teachings with her. It also keeps you real. In my previous job, worked with a lot of tribal leaders, and so it changed the conversation to say, like, hey, my family's on the res right now. You're not talking to somebody who's disconnected from the needs of Indian country. I'm living it. I understand it. It was funny.
It gives you that cred too. That keeps that. You're not some bureaucrat in a suit in Washington D.C. You get that street cred a little bit from Mission Town.
It was interesting. One time, we were on a call talking wildland fire, and I looked out my window, and there was a prairie fire going on. I'm like, "Say, guys, I need to go check this out and make sure everything's okay." Yeah. So it's good, and maintaining that connection is just so important.
So to me, Gaby, she's an OG at NDN, but she's also OG in Indian country too. Can you share a little bit about your work, prior to NDN, and the things that you have done, and where you've come from?
Yeah. So I'll be 62 next month, and so there's a long line there of things that I've been involved with over the years. I've been working since I was probably 13 years old. I had my first job, my first little youth employment summer job, and it was scraping off gum off the bottom of desks in the middle school. That was my first job in this little town called Morris, Minnesota, where one of those first Indian programs where my mom and my aunties were attending at that time. I went to boarding school too in Lawton, Oklahoma, Fort Sill Indian School, no longer operating now, but then moved to the Twin Cities to attend the Red Schoolhouse in 1980. And I graduated from the Red Schoolhouse. And the Red Schoolhouse is one of the first, at the time we called them our Indian survival schools. Those survival schools grew out of that culture-based education, that self-determination movement and era of that time. And so, I feel really lucky to have been part of that kind of educational experience at that time after a boarding school experience, and then going to a culture-based education school like that at the time, and being among some of our AIM leaders at the time, both men and women. So I'm really fortunate to have been part of that. My first kind of official job after college, I was involved in different things, helping form a battered women's shelter. That's what we called them at the time. One of the first shelters in Minnesota, Women of Nations, that was formed, Eagle's Nest Shelter, and then a shelter for youth, Ain Dayang Shelter, which I spent 16 years there. starting as a counselor and then becoming its director, it still operates as an emergency shelter for Native youth. It grew into then transitional housing and supportive housing and family services and a whole wraparound of services. But my mother, who was an educator, became very concerned about the status of our language. And so she was very active in the language revitalization efforts, and this is going back into like the early 1990s. And so I supported her through a lot of her work. She passed in 2013, but she was part of the founding effort of a nonprofit called Dakota Wichocha, which is devoted to language and lifeways, Dakota Language and Lifeways. And I remain very much involved with that as well. So those are just some of the things that, I've been involved in. But because of that commitment to language, when at the time my first involvement in formal philanthropy, other than being a grant seeker myself, was then becoming involved with the Grotto Foundation. And I don't think they're actively grant making anymore, but at the time they had a 15-year commitment to language revitalization. And that was unheard of at the time. Who makes those kind of commitments? Usually, we see 1-year grants.
They should be making some of those commitments today.
Yes. That's right. We see 3-year grants at the most, maybe 5, 6. They made a long view commitment to language revitalization. And so I worked with that foundation. And that was kind of my first, work and involvement with formal philanthropy until, then going to Margaret A. Cargill in 2010. But I was sharing with Wheezy too. For a time, I did some federal work, did some tribal training, technical assistance with, those federal funding streams that flow into our tribal communities. I did that for a time. I worked with tribes as well, worked as a tribal administrator. So, there's a long list of things there. But what I'll say is, what has been so unique and gratifying about being here is that we honor community self-determination in a way that I've never seen before. Even, in these efforts that we see in Indian country that come out of, funders or others that want to support it, we actually are doing that. And Redco, some of the work you've been involved, those are some of those examples of how you rematriate resources to our community, to our people, that really does honor self-determination in a real way.
And when people are listening to the show, they're thinking about land back, and they're thinking about what does money and grant making and all these things have to do with land back? Well, one of the big questions, especially the white people, especially the Washichus, always say, well, if we give you the land back, what are you going to do with that land? Kind of have the attitude, as they're peeking outside their window, locking their door when they hear the word. But it's because we want to, when we get our land back, we want to do things like rebuild our food systems. We want to return the land, the buffalo to the land. We want to create economic opportunity for our people. We want to build a future for our people. We're not just getting land back for land back's sake. We're getting land back to create a way for our people and, quite frankly, to teach humanity what's possible when you do that and you reestablish your relationship with the land in a sacred and equitable way. And so that's what I love about these examples, and that's why I wanted to share with the audience and our partners and our grantees and our funders some of the stories of how all of us came to this work and how relevant our journey into this work is in this very moment as we talk about land back and as we build and continue to expand that movement around land back. So we will jump into that in just a minute. just want to talk about family just a little bit. The other day in Morning Circle, you know, every for listeners and viewers out there, you know, our office and where the studio actually is located is at the NDN Collective headquarters, right here in Mini-Luzaha, North Rapid City, the north side, in the hood. We got relatives who are unsheltered and coming in right off the street, you know, right now. And we're just in community here, you know, but what we do every day here, no matter what, don't matter if there's 5 of us or if there's 25 of us, we circle up and we make a prayer. We auxilia or smudge off and cleanse ourselves. Then we say a gratitude and kind of check in. And the other morning at Morning Circle, Chie here, older brother, said, "Man, you know, I might be the leader, but I have a whole tribal council all wrapped up into one person, and that's my wife." I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about your family a little bit and talk about why that's so important to you.
Oh yeah, thanks for real. Like, I mean, that's my rock. That's what the whole reason why I'm here and able to do anything. I have 3 sons and a baby girl, you know, age 12 to 4. And, you know, they're awesome. They're awesome. And it's amazing to watch the little guys, you know, start to grow into men. And then my wife, Donna, you know, I mentioned, you know, I was gone for basically the last 3 years, and they stayed at home, and she held it down, raising the kids, keeping the house, going to school. She got a degree while basically being a single mom almost at home. And keeping it in close contact with the community, you know. So even if I wasn't able to go to a sweat or go, you know, to an event, she was there for our family. And then my oldest boy, you know, had to kind of step up and be the man of the house a little bit, you know, take some of that male leadership for the family, and you know, he did an awesome job. So, you know, I'll be honest, my family is the most important to me. And, you know, the opportunity to do some of the work, and we could talk about later. That was the only thing that was worth spending time away from my family. And because there's nothing more important than that time. So I owe my wife and my kids a huge gratitude, as well as all the other people that stepped up and helped the family while I was basically in DC gone.
Yeah, and to be clear, whenever I was recruiting Wizi, the first meeting was just with him, but the second meeting was with her. She was the second meeting. She was a part of that meeting. She said, "I want to know what's going on here. You know what you two are talking about and conjuring up." And I was like, "Oh, that's who I need to convince. That's who I need to convince." But I liked being able to observe that and to know both of you, and you know, the thoughtfulness about your families and how these decisions to do this work, you know, affect your future. Appreciate that a lot.
It's teamwork.
Teamwork all the way around. Huh? Let's talk about LANDBACK for a minute. Let's talk about what LANDBACK. I want to hear from Tui Gaby. You know, you came up out of that whole Red Power movement, and you were one of the first ones, you know, to be at the survival schools, at the Red Schoolhouse, and you know, those were direct products of the Red Power movement. And you know, LANDBACK is the Red Power movement of this current generation. And what does that mean to you, like, as somebody who's been in this work and in this movement for a long time? What does LANDBACK and the current iteration of this movement mean to you?
Yeah, I know that for me, it does mean the actual return of land to our people. First and foremost, it does mean that. It also means the reclamation of lifeways, the reclamation of everything connected to land, our relationship to land, the practices, our lifeways that are connected to land, all of those things. So that's what land back means to me. And it's part of this continuous thread that we always talk about. We've been saying land back for about the last 7-8 years now, but that is the same call that has been part of this continuous thread that our people have been calling for since our resistance began. And our resistance continues. And that reclamation, that revitalization, that renewal, all of those efforts, they're all connected to that.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, that's I always say. It's like we didn't invent land back. You know, like land back's not just a hashtag. It's in our blood. It's in our identity. It's in our genetic, memory. It's in our spirits. Some people don't know. Land back has been happening inside the federal government and supporting it. Wizi sitting here came from was in the federal government for a few years working on land back. And I think sometimes when we're on the outside of we're on the outside of government, we're on the north side of Rapid here, or we're over on Lower Sioux, or maybe Rosebud. Hey, but we don't really think about we don't think about like there's Indian people, Lakotas and Dakotas and Native people inside the federal government who care about land back and are actually trying to work to get it back, and it's true. Can you talk about that experience a little bit of like coming straight off the res and then into DC and then like there was this growing land back movement? Like what was that like? And also what are some of the stuff that you were able to see happen? Yeah.
So I think there's kind of like two things are like super important to remember. And one of them is this, and I'm speaking to everybody, every single U.S. citizen in the country has a constitutional duty, not a right, a duty. If you claim to be a U.S. citizen, if you support the U.S. Constitution, you have to support land back, because the Constitution says that treaties are the supreme law of the land. Treaties are the supreme law of the land. The United States government made commitments to Indian nations that they were going to recognize their land and their territories. Those are commitments. Those are sacred commitments. From the Indian side, we sealed those with sacred prayer, and those are covenants that are blessed by God, the Creator. But if you're a U.S. citizen, you pay taxes, you have a constitutional duty to support land back and to live up to the U.S. Constitution. And so based on that framework, being able to go into the federal government and say, you know what, we need to live up to those constitutional duties. We need to try to live up to those treaties. That's how we kind of started to unlock a lot of this work. And it also this idea and this concept that when the Indians have control of the land, it's good for everybody. It's good and it's a benefit for everybody. If you go to some of these places throughout the country, you can look at federal managed land right next to Indian managed land where wildfires have gone through. And you look at some of the federal land and it's completely decimated, just charred stumps. And you look at the Indian land and the trees have, because of the way they managed it, and it's growing back strong and resilient. And the trees are still standing. And there's examples of that all over the country. And so like specific examples of that, include, working with some of the tribes in the Northwest, for example, and creating intertribal coalitions that not only represent the tribal governments, but also spiritual leadership, and figuring out and working together to actually thinking about developing legislation to return that land. We actually, in 1934, when the Indian Reorganization Act was passed, there's a budget line item that says acquisition of Indian land. It was recognized in 1934 that the federal government should have a role in acquiring land for tribes, or we're acquiring land for tribes. And so one of the things we did is we started to put money into that. But there's a whole lot more work that needs to happen. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be here, is to continue that work. But again, I can't get back to that initial point. If you're a U.S. citizen, if you pay taxes, if you vote, if you believe in the Constitution, you have to support Land Back. You're required to. You have to honor those Indian treaties.
That's powerful. Yeah, it's right on the wall, right, right here. That's a little piece of the Constitution on the wall. That's why we got that here. In the studio. It reminds me of a moment that I just wanted to share. In the Land Back movement, there's so many moments. Like we have moments that are fighting on the front lines, and times we've done ceremonies to get land back, and ceremonies after we've gotten land back and implemented things, and like there's all kinds of things that are going on all the time. But I remember this particular meeting. It was held right here at NDN Collective headquarters, and there was members of our tribe and leaders of NDN Collective, and there was this big long table, and there's a whole bunch of Lakotas and on this side of the table, and then there was the Department of Interior on the other side of the table. And we were talking about the return of the Black Hills. We were talking about what are the different strategies and what are the different ways. It was really, it was a strategy meeting. We were strategizing about different ways to do that, and how do we maneuver, these laws that have been imposed on us and that we have to navigate and all of that. But when the meeting was over, Madonna Thunderhawk, who was in the meeting, she came up to me and she grabbed my arm, and she was like, "My boy, you know what? Did you know something about that meeting?" And I said, "What about it?" She said, "Did you realize that we just now sat down with the federal government, the United States of America, about the return of the sacred Black Hills? And everybody in that room was Indian." And I was like, I looked around, and everybody was mingling, and I was like, she's right. That we're it blew my mind. And she was like, never from the time that we first took over the BIA headquarters to Alcatraz to Wounded Knee to the Trail of Broken Treaties, she's like, I couldn't fathom that something like that is possible, that we're standing around this problem together as a people. And it put it into perspective for me, and it reminded me of the power of that. And we prayed before, prayed for it. We even had Res Dog, the show. We even had Res Dog references in there. I think there was even one of your colleagues at the Department of Interior, when we were talking about the Black Hills, and he leaned over and said, "You mean the whole damn thing?" So it was just it was a moment. It was a special moment, for us. As we begin to wind down here, here at NDN, I want to talk a little bit just about Indigenous leadership, Lakota leadership, Dakota leadership, Indigenous leadership, and why it's so important in this work in the Land Back movement. And we'll start with you, Tui.
Well, it's a pretty special thing that, when you look at the three of us here, we are part of that Ocheti Shankoni, and we represent that, and we're connected here. And I think our connections that brought us together have to do with Land Back, have to do with what happened at Standing Rock, that resistance. All three of us were there at various times, and you certainly were there, an integral part of all of that. But when I think of leadership, it is the people who love their people, enough to be able to be called upon, and also to step forward when asked. I was told to be cautious of people that want to be picked sometimes, or want to be upfront, because there's a certain humility, I think, for us that is necessary for leadership, and a certain integrity. We've talked about that too, an integrity of leadership that always coming from that place of love, compassion, but also to be brave, to be courageous, to do what needs to be done. Whatever we are facing, to face it together, to build the strength and that true collective, that connection as relatives, as family, because that's who we are. We are relatives, and we bring our relatives together. That's a pretty special thing to be able to do, to bring relatives together, to be able to move together towards something, towards that goal, facing something down. That's a leadership quality. That's an attribute of leadership. And it's thinking of not just yourself, of course, but how is this going to impact our children, our grandchildren? For me, I think about that a lot because of where I am in my phase of life. I think of my grandchildren. And I know that I may not be here for both the victories and the challenges that may lie ahead. And I think about what can I do now in this lifetime to make it the best way possible for them. And even when I'm not, in this earthly realm, to be that ally in their prayer at that time, when that time comes. So that's what I'll say about leadership.
That's beautiful. I really, that's sitting with me. I appreciate those powerful words. Wizi, Indigenous leadership, how do you see it?
Oh man, there's so many aspects to Indigenous leadership, and I think just a couple of things to like pull out is it's intergenerational. On one hand, it's we need our elders saying go do this or go do or don't do that, and then you need people in their middle-aged people to go do it, and I think that's a big thing about leadership is the titles don't matter. It's about who's gonna just do it. And I think that's a leader. And then I think about young people, and I was thinking about my youngest boy, and I think he this was like last year, and he's like 5 years old, and he asked me a question. He said, "Ate, if you saw a sign in the black, a sign that said the Black Hills were for sale, would you go knock it down?" He's 5 years old and he's talking that way. And I was like, yeah, son, I'd go knock it down. But that's leadership. That's the youth telling us where to go and what to concentrate on. The kind of mindset we need to have. I think another aspect is this balance between male and female leadership. And that I think through colonization, we really got away from that balance. That, we got a lot of men out there who still kind of, think that they're leaders just because they're men. Well, it ain't that way. It's a balance, and we got all these moms who have been leading their families by themselves for generations, holding it down. And so, I remember one time we were, in my two jobs ago when I was at Redco, we had these youth and we were asking them, who do you admire? Who's the person that you admire? And I would say over half of those youth that we asked talked about their mothers. And so that's leadership. And so that balance between the male and female is like super important, along with kind of the age piece, and then just doing, again, just being the ones who do, and not needing recognition, not wanting recognition. Those are all leaders.
Yeah, that's powerful. I appreciate that. Yeah, and the reason why I was like leaning into that question more and is that as we talk about the land back movement and our work here, our nonprofits and the government and these are all just like tools, right? So like NDN Collective and as a nonprofit and our different organizations and subsidiaries and all that stuff, those are just tools for the time being, but that this work is really about the liberation of our people and our homelands to be free again, to be free. And it takes leadership to get there. And as I think about this organization, I think about how much shared leadership is within this organization.
Yeah.
And us as senior leadership here, really our job is to steward it. Our job is to caretake for it, because within this organization, we have so much leaders who are leading work already, whether it be our communications and storytelling and narrative and tactical media and our organizers and our campaigns and our community development work and our resource rematriation work. So much leadership is happening there. And all of that work is the building of other leaders in communities and investing into leaders in communities. And we really just have to be stewards, We have to be stewards. And I always think of Indigenous leadership as a circle, not a hierarchy, not a pyramid, but a circle. But at different times, different of us have to step out into that circle and say, I will lead this part of this work. Because one of the things I've often said is the opposite of leadership is indecision. When we get stuck, when we get stuck to the place of indecision. And then when we become indecisive and we're scared to make a decision because of an outcome this way or the other, that impacts the people.
Right.
And so we have to be thoughtful. We have to be compassionate. We have to have empathy. We have to love our people, love our homelands, but we also cannot be afraid to make decisions. And I take that really serious here at NDN. And I know that as we step into the next, decade of NDN, one of the things for me that I really, really thought about a lot is that part of the work is to carry. It's like carrying a bucket of water, and because of the challenges that exist throughout Indian country, that water, it gets heavy. Sometimes that water, it's overflowing out of that bucket, and it gets heavy to carry. And I need help carrying that. And having both of you on this team, working here at NDN and doing this work at Indian country and for the people and for the land, it's like the three of us carrying that water together. It's lighter.
That's true.
And because for me, I want to be around doing this work for the long haul. I want to be sitting where you're sitting someday, where I'm like, I'm going to be 62, 20 years from now, 20 years from now. I want to be saying that and still doing this work, not being somewhere burnt out and be like, oh, no, the good old days have passed, And so I'm learning a lot, even like from you, Tui, and the way that you lead. And I'm trying to apply those things earlier in life than wait. And so I really appreciate that. And I think that the intergenerational idea of leadership is fundamental. So we're going to begin to wrap up. And I want to wrap up kind of by saying, like, each of you, just 1 minute, what excites you about the future right now? What is the thing for you that gets you going? And we'll start with you, Tui.
I'm so proud of you. I'm proud and grateful that you have come to join us and all that you are bringing to NDN, but to the work that we care about, all the things that we care about. We have really blazed some trails. We have really done some things that have never been seen before. The amount of resourcing that we've been able to do, and I know will continue. The amount of organizing and action that we've been able to do, and I know will continue. we've been changing mindsets, consciousness about a whole host of issues, all centered on land back. We have been able to really demonstrate, show what self-determination really means, what liberation means to our people. And I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about continuing to face down the challenges ahead with all of you and really doubling down on everything that we believe in and everything that we've been doing.
Coming up, you get me fired up over here. It's the end of the show, but we're getting fired up over here.
For real. As you're talking, the first thing that came to mind was my mother. And she was always telling me, every people have a role that they're supposed to do, something they're supposed to do at different times throughout history. And she said, for Native people, for Indigenous people, right now, we have to be the light for the rest of the world about how to live on this planet, how to be in harmony with Mother Earth. And she was always saying, son, that's what part of your work has to be about. And so when I think about what gets me excited, it's all the same things you were talking about. How LANDBACK is a movement. This organization carries that movement, not by itself, but it's a caretaker of that. And we have to go all out on that and be able to continue to show and lift up what's possible when Indigenous people have the land, how we steward it, how we take care of it, because that's the way forward. Quite frankly, if humans are going to continue to exist on this planet, then it's going to have to take those lessons and those examples from Indigenous people.
Absolutely.
That's what too.
Yeah, I'll close out by saying this. I've been thinking about this. Earlier this week there was an inauguration, and there's a new president of the United States. We used to say the Great White Father, and now it's the Great Orange Father. Apparently. And so here we are in these crazy times that we are in. But I was thinking about this movement, the LANDBACK movement, in face of the rise of authoritarianism, and how I believe that not only will the LANDBACK movement continue, but it is necessary in the rise of authoritarianism. Because LANDBACK fundamentally holds the mirror up to this country and settler colonial governments and countries of the world at a time when it's imperative. Because the only way to fight authoritarianism over time is to build a multiracial democracy that's representative of the people. And the reality is there will not ever be a multiracial democracy in this country that doesn't include LANDBACK. LANDBACK is forever part of this country getting right with itself, righting historical wrongs, holding a mirror up to itself. And the act of doing so will lead to a multiracial democracy, what is imperative for us to fight the rise of authoritarianism. And Indian people and Indigenous people have fought against this government. We have fought against colonial governments of the world, and we're still here. Yeah. We still have our language. We still have our culture. We still have our land. We could not be defeated no matter what the most powerful, richest corporations in the countries of the world have done to try to destroy us. And there's lessons learned in our resistance. So at this time, if people think that authoritarianism is going to go away by playing it safe, and not being on the streets and not calling it what it is and not facing it, you're wrong. We have to be here fighting it, and we have to be building a new tomorrow. And that's the work we're going to do here at NDN. So as we go into the next 4 years, am I concerned? Yes. Am I scared? No. Because our ancestors taught us not to be scared. And so I will wrap up by saying that with this leadership configuration that we have, with this awesome tool that we have, and with this robust movement, we are fired up to make a way for our people in the coming years. And the Land Back movement is emerging as a global Indigenous movement to return our sacred homelands and create rights-based approaches to rebuilding equitable communities. And that's the work that we're going to continue to do right here at NDN Collective. So check us out, donate to us. Without your contributions to NDN Collective, we can't be here. Every dollar matters, whether you're a grant making institution or you're the grandma sitting in Fridley, Minnesota. Every donation helps and supports our work. So thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to our awesome production team here and our team of storytellers, Willi White, Steph, Viera, and all of the other team here too. Shout outs to all of you. Thank you for listening. And let's get this season 3 for Land Back for the People on the books.
All right.
Right on.
Yes.
Let's go then.
Let's go then.
Live it.